So, if you all remember, in the previous lecture, we was discussing about the 1950s, actually 1950s, 60s, and 70s in the Indian politics, and referring to the chronology only, because when we read history, by the way, of course, I told you why reference to history. And giving justification for that, what I told you, that today's politics is tomorrow's history, isn't it? So, most of the times when we are trying to understand what is an institution, or for example, the dominant category, that is a state, what is it? How do we understand it? Does it come from physics, that is the state of equilibrium? Does it come from here? Or it denotes a kind of form or something. You understand the form, no? Form, for example, when someone asks you, do you know what a triangle is? So you know what is a triangle, isn't it? But how do you for sure know that this particular triangle is a right angle triangle, and so on and so forth? You know it, no? Because you understand the form of it. It's not the table present in front of you through which you come to know that it is table, but the tableness. What makes a table a table? For example, what makes a triangle a triangle? What makes a horse a horse? What makes a particular thing with certain characteristics a particular thing? That is why, because it is a very ephemeral concept, by the way. The word, I think, you could be curious about it. Ephemeral means transitory, ever-changing, and in flux, okay? Keeps changing. What is in state? It constitutes its own boundary, defines the limits and the jurisdiction. And most of the times, what we call state is actually a product of the people, republic, coming up to strike a consensus. And if you go to the history, because without understanding the state, it is not possible at all to understand what we are talking about. Becomes too much, no? So you need to understand the proper history of it, and once you are aware of the history, the background, different ways of looking at it, then you start having little commitment with respect to the understanding of the idea of the state, what it is, no? For example, if you look at the history of political thought or political philosophy, because state is one of the categories that we read in political science, no? Along with state, the other important category that you read in political science is, number one, in my opinion, equality, alright? Along with the state, liberty, alright? And somewhere fraternity, but at other places pursuit of happiness or whatever, justice, the key word, as highlighted by somebody, These are the keywords that we study. When we study state, we try to understand if the state in itself is a brief approximation of these three concepts, for example, practically working on the ground. No? The state, for example, if you focused on the reading, the writer is saying that poor people differentiating political society from civil society, Karl Chatterjee, and the difference is quite nuanced, so many people actually do not understand what he is talking about and get confused. But Karl Chatterjee is a very complex analytical writer, civil society, right? So this is the most of the world. If you looked at the reading, he is referring politics in the most of the world. The title of his book, Most of the World, that is political society. And civil society is urban, agrarian, bureaucratic, bourgeoisie, alright? Bourgeois, in alliance, and nothing more than that. That is the civil society domain. But to Parth Chatterjee, what we need to understand is not civil society, because civil society, of course, will give only, we know factually that only 30% of India, even today, lives in urban areas. That is, 70% of the people live in the hinterland, isn't it? So that is not the majority, and it's a kind of causal explanation. This one giving causal explanation of a particular phenomena, that is civil society, by referring to the alliance between the urban bourgeoisie, capitalist bourgeoisie, agrarian bourgeoisie, and bureaucratic elite. No, so that they can strike a consensus. And for example, here these words are the keywords that you need to understand. But here in most of the world, in political society, Parth Chatterjee is referring to the day-to-day life of the common man. Or maybe if at the risk of reductionism, because common man, the word common man doesn't tell much. No? It's just a kind of identifier, no? Identity. For example, as we say that from that nation or caste or creed or ethnicity or religion, language, nationality, no? Just an identity. So, but he is talking about the people, quote unquote, if you focus on the reading, living on the margins of legality. No? Remember, what is margins of legality? What do we mean by it? Of course, margin, you know, margin or seam in English. No? The edge of a cloth or something, that is called margin, no? Or anything. In paper margin. Margins of legality, that is, they are living at the border of it, the legal and illegal. For example, referring to the squatters in the Dharavi slums or in hundreds of slums around Delhi, he is referring to their continuous organization, informal organization, and their interaction with the local representative, and putting in front of them the demand that because you are a state functionary, you owe this to me. It is your job to do it. And if you don't do it properly, obviously legality, but the legitimacy of the governed, because the governed will legitimize the state, no? Irrespective of the fact that he is living in a shanty or whatever, the political society here referring to the majority of the masses living in the Indian cities, and the peasants in the village, and the farmers, and along with that this overworked industrial working class, isn't it? So that is Marxist approach. Of course, very light introduction, because Marxist approach has a lot of terminology, and if you don't actually Google the words, the vocabulary, you will not be able to actually on your own make sense of it. Some curiosity, some work is always needed in Marxist, in decoding the Marxist literature. No? For example, the word consciousness is a totally different concept in Karl Marx's literature and the literature, for example, in theology or spiritual conception of it, referring to the false consciousness and telling that the identity of a particular primitive nature is a false consciousness. So consciousness becoming the key here. So you today in today's lecture you must be very carefully thinking about Parth Chatterjee's two ideas. One is the difference between political society and civil society, and what he tries to say by contrasting these two things. Ultimately, what is the nature of Indian state? No. After that, we are trying to understand. So now you can actually look around wherever you live and you find people the way Parth Chatterjee is writing about them in the reading, less or more. If you read it carefully, you will find that Parth Chatterjee's writing is actually a reflection on the day-to-day life of those who live, quote unquote, on the margins of legality, and to one more word I would add, justification. It is they do not need justification to exist, for example, isn't it? Somewhere or other, people will live, no? So, basically, always character and approach and form, these words denoting a flux and a kind of, not stable. The concept of state is not stable. It's unstable concept. Okay, that is why actually when you refer to the characteristics part, which is very important to understand, referring to the Indian state or any state for that matter. Ji, ma'am. You're not getting?
Because I'm from science background and these the words I'm not getting.
You're not getting? How? Listen to it carefully and focus on the word, okay? That is how you learn it. So, social science and humanities, they have different way of communicating the information, not through figures and numbers, but through powerful words and vocabulary. So you focus on the word only, then probably your transition to the humanities and social sciences might. Yes.
Sir, is state a combination of political society and civil society?
State is a combination of yes, both of it. Both of it.
So what would be the one-liner definition of state?
We focus on the characteristics and then we will get all the answers, let me tell you. So characteristics, they call some states are liberal, alright? Then they go on to say that others are communists or predominant liberal capitalist and two dominant categories, Marxist, communist state. Alright? By the way, the word communist state is an oxymoron. You know why? Because if you have a rudimentary understanding of what communism is in Karl Marx, it is actually statelessness, where there is no state, stateless. No? So this is only a slight qualifier to be used carefully only. And at other times people go on to say that we have a socialist state, alright, which is different from communist or liberal capitalist, alright. And at other times we go on to find that we have a welfare state, isn't it? And which is a version of socialist state only, but an invention, I think, by the liberal state, so as to assimilate the criticism of Marxist criticism of capitalism and trying to equalize, for example, no? So now this is also becoming clear to us that these categories are, although they are defined, conceptualized and written, but they have limited potential to describe what state actually is. It is only looking how it is working right now, looking at it, that we can actually understand. So in liberal you see what? Capital dominating, no? Here you see in the communist you see capital and individual, right? To give you the points, basic points, so that you have the theoretical background to understand what I talk in the class. Otherwise, it will be difficult for you to understand. Marxist communist means here the collective and the social is dominant. That is not the individual. Collective and capital, of course, is a social industry, whatever you can call it. So, because in working class state, proletariat state, the word capital is hardly used. So you have, for example, not capital with people, because people are not allowed to have property. No, they do not have capital. They are industrious, and to each according to his ability, and so on. You know the quote, isn't it? Socialist regime is a transitory regime. In transition from extremely unequal exploitative capitalism to more humanized progress towards this particular So intermediate state wherein the state is controlled. What is the characteristic of the state in a socialist regime? It is a proletarian state. Alright? Working class state. The working class, which is majority, controls the state and organizes the industry, production and distribution of the goods, materials, services, and so on at a collective level, not for the profit, but for striking some kind of equilibrium. So, for example, when we look at the ecological crisis now, people are just wondering what is the best method, economic method, to organize distribution and production and so on, circulation of commodities, supply chain. So people are wondering, and you could also wonder if capitalist political economy is more helpful to understand liberal political economy to be more. So France in our Frankel you were doing in the reading, no? So this guy is a political economist. The word came not, I think, with reference to the reading, but political economy here in this particular reading is quite important. So if you could Google out for me, guys, what is political economy, that would be very nice of you. Okay? Because today I am teaching you political economy only. The Karl Marx's first very important work, published, I think, when, guys, anybody of you? A critique of political economy. What was the year? It was 1858. In order to understand the Marxist, highlight the Marxist characteristic of state, what state is in a Marxist schema, you need to understand a few things. The one of which was the word political economy, of course, very important. And political economy, and other than that, which I will be highlighting in the future lectures also, you have the words such as bourgeoisie and what do these words mean, by the way, without getting hold of it, little difficult. Proletariat, what else, guys? Dialectical materialism, all right, which I will just explain to you in the future classes. Dialectical materialism, what it is, and other than that, class is a keyword in the when trying to understand the Marxist literature, and of course. Conceptual category, all of these, to describe certain section of the population or certain attribute of the society which ultimately makes the state. So somebody referring to the state, fourth class. Dialectical materialism or historical materialism. No? Applying to the history, both historical and dialectical. So I will just explain these this word, particular
Both
word.
are same
Historical materialism refers to how do we explain history as a dialectic process. No? What is dialectic is giving a proposition that the chalk is white, full stop, and again, thesis, antithesis. Chalk is not completely white, it is impure. No? And then giving synthesis that this chalk is white but impure. No? Synthesis. Thesis, that is the proposition that something is this. So Karl Marx he favors reason, for example, okay, logic and sustained criticism, long-lasting, sustained, unwavering commitment to this, and perfection ultimately is one of the refined. So communism, of course, is an ideal to some, but the Marxist, of course, you will be trained. And let me tell you a few things about who Karl Marx is and what you get after reading him. So, for example, it is a taboo to read Karl Marx. Okay, not everybody has the capacity and the leisure. Number two, to read Karl Marx. Number two, you will never be recommended a reading of Karl Marx in your college. In any university around the world, under the syllabus, this guy is forbidden. You will not find original reading of Karl Marx in any of the universities around the world. The professor would not recommend because they are afraid of teaching him. So powerful, dangerous. No, this guy. So, for example, you could read a few lines from Karl Marx, and of course, you will be amazed. Let me tell you, by the sheer brilliance and the illuminating power in the vocabulary. So he just opens up a whole new world to you, and then of course you just become very intelligent and a good career and everything. So Marx himself claims in his work that I shall give you gold and rubies, the reader. So if you could just not believe but commit to the idea that yes, all the gold in the book, all the treasure. So you could read Karl Marx and his idea of very humanistic philosophy, political philosophy. Alright, the Marxist theory of the state. It is said that he reviewed 50,000 books in his lifetime. Alright, verbatim. And he was born in 1818, died in 1883, and since then no was born who could do the same thing with exact methodical precision. What he did, nobody ever did it. This guy, brilliant researcher above all, no, establishing his own newspaper and so on, and destroying states, upper states, and inspiring millions of people, billions of people around the world to wake up and to fight for your right and your, this guy inspiration for people in China, Russia, Cuba, Brazil, Ecuador, Colombia, Venezuela, Mexico, no, Africa, India also, devoted readers, and China you go, he is in the pop culture, people trying to renovate him by using his poster for music and so on, but without opening up the vista, the horizon of thought, it is not easy to make sense. Why I am telling you all this story? So that you come to realize and know what you know through our interaction in the class. And rest, of course, is dependent upon the reading. And if you require, I will give you Karl Marx to read. For example, his letter, he wrote something, guys. So Marxist state and his story is important, and I will, of course, paying a tribute to Karl Marx. So in 1834, this guy is a 16-year-old boy, Karl Marx, and he is writing an essay to his father on the reflection of a young man on the choice of profession, what you should do as a young man. No? So I think 3-4 pages, but if you read it, it's amazing what he writes. So Marxist state, of course, is in opposition to those who exploit the working class on wage labor and surplus value. One more word in Marxist literature. All right, expropriate the surplus value. Do it. What is surplus value? So, may anybody could you please highlight on this particular surplus value? 2 words, no? Surplus value. What this is refers in the Marxist literature, and once and for all, this should rest with you, and you should understand it. What it means today. Surplus refers to excess, no, of something, which is extra than what is expected, or whatever you can call it. Surplus refers to the, for example, in Marxist literature, the labor and the word laborer. No? The laborer, when he engages on hire in work, he produces a lot of stuff. To be most succinct in a lot of stuff he produces. But if you try to find out the mean value of that product and compare it to the wage that is given at the end of every month, you will find that he gets only 30% of the whole thing. So this surplus, whatever is 70%, goes to the industrialist as a profit, so that the capitalist can expand the business and so on, and blame the worker. So primitive accumulation, a keyword came now, that we need money from the poor so that we can have big industry. That is the logic in India nowadays. No? So 30%, what was I telling you? By the way, it's laborer, no? Surplus value, no? Surplus value, wage labor. Surplus is the 30% comes to the wage laborer. 70% is expropriated by the capitalist. That is the one who purchases land, labor, machinery, and technology nowadays. No. What is the most important factor of production today, as we live here? Technology, access to technology. Technology is very costly and sometimes even unthinkable. The most advanced cutting edge production, to appropriate the whole machinery, for example, establish a Tesla plant or so forth, it's a very, so state has to give a lot of loan to the industrialist. So he goes on to buy it and purchase in the future. But of course, everything shall not be told in the class. So there are some things for you also to think of after the class. So expropriation is also a keyword, by the way, in the Marxist literature. Expropriation of what? Of course, I told you. Capital or surplus value. Expropriation from the wage laborer by the state, and if it is dominated by alliance or coalition, that coalition itself using the state and machinery to expropriate the surplus value from the industrial wage laborer. And other than that, of course, the keywords, they will keep expanding. I'll be taking a few more lectures on the Marxist literature, because state, of course, you will understand, because the theory, let me tell you, which argues for statelessness shall be most powerful, without any doubt, in explaining what it is, isn't it? Because it will transcend by understanding, no? So you will find in the reading, let me tell you this word. Chatterjee is saying that Marxist theory was powerful in explaining what was happening at that time, 1980s. The word powerful, but strong, the word uses, no? I think the word is strong. Marxist theory is a strong and powerful theory of explaining the characteristic of Indian state. So some of the readings in the history also you might find, such as, of course, you would be curious and you should know, because I am telling you. So D.D. Kusambi, for example, if you look at in history, this guy was the first person to write a Marxist history of India proper. D.D. Kusambi. So you could find this guy. He has, I think, written something which is read for